A gifted black mechanic never imagined that pausing to assist a stranger on a desolate, dark road would irrevocably alter his life. He was merely a mechanic, a man with oil-stained hands and aspirations too grand for his meager means. Yet destiny has peculiar ways. A simple act of kindness, a choice to pull over instead of driving past, would ignite a sequence of events leading to an opportunity that could transform his dream into reality. Before we delve into the narrative, tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. John Carter had always embodied persistence. Born and raised in the vibrant heart of New Orleans, he grew up enveloped by the roar of engines and the aroma of motor oil. From a tender age he was captivated by automobiles. How they functioned, how they moved, how each component interlocked like a complex puzzle only the most adept hands could solve. While other children engaged in video games or cycled through the neighborhood, John dedicated hours to tinkering with old engines in his uncle's backyard, mastering through trial and error until he could dismantle and reassemble an entire motor blindfolded. Life hadn't been easy for him. Growing up in a working-class district, he imbibed the value of diligent effort from his mother, a woman who juggled 2 jobs just to ensure food was on the table. His father was absent from his life, and without a strong male figure to guide him, John found his role models in men who worked with their hands: mechanics, construction workers, welders. They were the ones who shaped his perception of the world, teaching him that a man's worth wasn't measured by his wealth but by the skills he possessed and the integrity with which he employed them. By his early 20s, John had already cultivated a reputation as one of the most proficient mechanics in his community. People trusted him because he was forthright. He wouldn't push unnecessary repairs or cut corners. He treated every vehicle as if it belonged to his own kin. This dedication eventually secured him a steady position at Tony's Auto Garage, a modest but renowned repair shop on the city's outskirts. Tony, the owner, was an old-school mechanic with over 3 decades in the business. He took a liking to John, recognizing in him the same drive and fervor he once possessed as a young man. Now at 35, John was among the top mechanics at the shop. There wasn't a car he couldn't fix, and customers specifically requested him when bringing in their vehicles. His hands were perpetually grimy, his work boots worn from years of standing, but he wouldn't have it any other way. He adored his job. Still deep down he knew he was capable of more. For years he had envisioned opening his own auto shop, a place where he could build something for himself, a business he could bequeath to his future children. He had diligently saved every spare dollar, stashing it in a savings account. But the reality was stark. Establishing a proper garage with the right equipment, location and team would cost at least $100,000. He had barely managed to accumulate a fraction of that. Loans were an option, but banks were hesitant to lend to someone without assets or collateral. So for the time being his dream remained just that, a dream. Nevertheless, John wasn't bitter about it. He was a pragmatist. He understood that success wasn't instantaneous, and he was prepared to invest years of hard work to achieve it. What he didn't realize, however, was that life had a knack for presenting unforeseen opportunities. Opportunities disguised as chance encounters, opportunities that could alter everything in an instant. And on one particular night as he locked up Tony's auto garage and drove home, weary from another lengthy shift, fate was about to put him to the test. As John Carter navigated the quiet streets of New Orleans that night, the familiar purr of his old pickup truck was his sole companion. The city, typically alive with music and chatter, felt different at this hour. Quieter, almost unsettling. Streetlights cast elongated shadows over the asphalt, and the occasional flickering neon sign was the only reminder that life still stirred somewhere beyond the deserted roads. It had been an exhausting day at the garage, an endless stream of customers requiring repairs, and all he desired now was to reach home, take a long shower and collapse onto his couch. But as he turned onto a more secluded stretch of road, something caught his eye. A car pulled over on the shoulder, its hazard lights flashing in the gloom. John's initial impulse was to continue driving. It was late and the neighborhood wasn't exactly the safest place to stop for strangers. But as he drew closer he could discern a lone figure beside the stalled vehicle. A woman in what appeared to be expensive business attire, pacing in frustration as she inspected the engine. She seemed out of place here, as if she belonged in a corporate office or a 5-star restaurant, not stranded on the side of a dimly lit road. He exhaled sharply, gripping the steering wheel as he deliberated. It wasn't his concern, he was tired. But then he thought of his mother, of the times she had been in situations where she had to rely on the kindness of strangers. If she were in this woman's shoes, he'd hope someone would stop to help her. With a resigned sigh, John pulled over, shifting his truck into park before stepping onto the pavement. "Looks like you're having some trouble," he called out as he approached, keeping his voice steady but non-threatening. The woman turned sharply, her guarded expression momentarily softening as she took him in. She was younger than he had anticipated, likely in her early 30s, with keen green eyes that still bore traces of annoyance from whatever had gone wrong with her car. "Yes, you could say that," she sighed, running a hand through her dark brown hair. "I have no idea what happened. One minute everything was fine, the next the engine just died." John nodded, stepping closer but maintaining a respectful distance. "Mind if I take a look?" She hesitated for a second, then gave a small nod. "Yeah, sure. At this point I'll take any help I can get." John popped the hood, letting the warm engine heat envelop him as he examined the components with a practiced eye. It didn't take long for him to identify the issue. A minor electrical problem that had shut down the system. It was a quick fix, something that would take him less than 10 minutes. He reached into his truck for his toolkit, rolling up his sleeves as he began to work. As he tightened a loose connection, the woman folded her arms and leaned against the car, observing him. "You seem to know what you're doing," she commented. John chuckled, not looking up. "Been working on cars since I was a kid. It's what I do." "Well, I appreciate it," she said sincerely. "I wasn't sure what I was going to do out here this late." "You're fortunate," John remarked. "Not many people pass through this road at this hour." "I know," she admitted, glancing around. "I was on my way home from a business trip. I closed a pretty significant deal today and I was supposed to be celebrating with my family tonight, but instead I'm standing here waiting for my car to betray me." John smirked as he finished up, wiping his hands on a rag before stepping back. "Well, good news. Your car isn't a traitor, just a little stubborn. Try starting it now." She arched her brow but complied, sliding into the driver's seat and turning the key. The engine roared back to life without hesitation. Her face illuminated with relief as she exhaled. "Oh, thank God. You just saved me from a complete disaster." John waved a hand dismissively. "It was nothing. Just a quick fix." She reached for her purse, pulling out a sleek leather wallet. "At least let me compensate you for your time." John shook his head. "No need. I was just helping out." The woman frowned, clearly unaccustomed to people declining money. "Come on, I insist. I probably kept you from getting home after a long day." "You did," John admitted with a chuckle. "But seriously, don't worry about it." She studied him for a moment before tucking the wallet away, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "Okay, if you won't take my money, at least let me have your business card or something. You're too skilled at this not to have your own shop." John hesitated for a second before reaching into his back pocket and pulling out a slightly worn card from Tony's auto garage. "I don't own it, but this is where I work. If you ever need help, you can find me there." She took the card, glancing at it before slipping it into her purse. "I'll keep that in mind," she smiled, a genuine one this time. "By the way, I never caught your name." "John," he said simply. She extended a hand. "Sophia." "Sophia Bennett." John shook her hand briefly before stepping back. "Well, Sophia, you should be good to go. Just keep an eye on it. If anything else acts up, bring it to a shop to get checked out properly." "Noted," she said as she shifted the car into gear. "Thanks again, John. I truly appreciate it." "Drive safe," he said, watching as she pulled back onto the road. John waited until her taillights vanished into the distance before heading back to his truck. As he slid behind the wheel, he shook his head slightly, exhaling. He didn't dwell on the encounter. It wasn't the first time he had assisted a stranger on the road, and it wouldn't be the last. To him, it was just another moment in a long day. What he didn't know, however, was that his small act of kindness had set something in motion. Something that would alter the course of his life in ways he never could have foreseen. The following evening, John found himself back at Tony's auto garage, working late again. The shop had officially closed an hour ago, but he had remained behind to complete a particularly challenging repair on an old Chevrolet that had been giving him trouble all day. The rest of the crew had departed, leaving the garage quiet except for the occasional clang of metal and the soft hum of the radio playing in the background. This was how John preferred it. No distractions, just him and the machinery working together in perfect harmony. As he tightened the final bolt, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, he heard the unmistakable sound of a luxury car pulling up outside. The deep, resonant engine of a Rolls-Royce wasn't something you often heard in this part of town. Curious, he set down his wrench and emerged from under the hood, his hands still covered in grease. The car, sleek and impeccably polished, came to a slow halt in front of the garage. The doors opened in near silence, and stepping out first was Sophia Bennett, looking even more refined than she had the night before. Gone was the frustration of being stranded. Tonight she carried herself with ease, dressed in an elegant yet understated outfit that exuded quiet affluence. But it wasn't just her. A tall, distinguished man emerged from the driver's side, his suit perfectly tailored, his silver hair neatly combed back. Even without an introduction, John knew who he was. Richard Bennett. John had heard the name before. It was difficult not to, especially in New Orleans. Richard Bennett was one of the city's most influential businessmen, a man renowned for his strategic mind and ability to revitalize struggling companies into flourishing empires. He wasn't merely wealthy. He was the kind of wealthy that commanded attention when he entered a room. John wiped his hands on a rag as they approached. He wasn't the type to be intimidated by riches, but he couldn't help but wonder why one of the most powerful men in the city had just arrived at his workplace. "Sophia," he greeted, nodding at her before directing his attention to Richard. "And you must be her father." Richard extended his hand, his grip firm but not overbearing. "Richard Bennett. And you must be John Carter, the man my daughter hasn't stopped talking about since last night." John raised an eyebrow, glancing at Sophia, who simply smiled. "Is that so?" Sophia shrugged. "You saved my night. That doesn't happen often." John chuckled, folding his arms. "Well, I appreciate the visit, but I take it this isn't just a social call." Richard's lips curved slightly as if he appreciated John's directness. "No, it's not. We wanted to speak with you in person. Do you have a moment?" John motioned toward the garage. "Sure, come on in." He led them inside, the scent of motor oil and rubber filling the air. It wasn't a luxurious office, but this was John's domain and he was comfortable here. He grabbed a couple of stools from the workbench, offering them seats before leaning against the metal tool chest himself. Richard surveyed the surroundings for a moment before speaking. "I'll be direct, John. I appreciate what you did for my daughter last night, not just fixing her car but refusing payment. That reveals something about your character." John shrugged. "I didn't do it for recognition. It just seemed like the right thing to do." Richard nodded as if that was precisely the answer he had anticipated. That's a rare quality these days. People don't often help without expecting something in return. He leaned forward slightly, his sharp blue eyes locking onto John's. "Tell me something. Do you enjoy working here?" John hesitated for a moment, not because he didn't know the answer, but because he wasn't sure where this conversation was heading. "I like what I do. I like working on cars, solving problems. But if you're asking whether I want to be a mechanic for someone else for the rest of my life, then no. I have grander ambitions than that." Richard smiled, glancing briefly at Sophia before turning back to John. "That's what I thought." He straightened, adjusting the cuff of his suit. "Sophia told me you've been wanting to open your own shop." John's jaw tightened slightly. He wasn't accustomed to discussing his dreams with strangers, let alone men like Richard Bennett. "Yeah, it's something I've been working toward. But a dream means little without the capital to realize it." Richard leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. "That's why we're here. I want to invest in you, John. $100,000. No strings attached, no debt hanging over your head. Just an investment in your talent and potential." John stared at him for a moment, certain he had misheard. Sophia was watching him carefully, awaiting his reaction. $100,000? John said slowly. "Because I helped your daughter fix a car?" Richard let out a low chuckle. "No, John. I'm offering you an investment because I believe in individuals who possess both skill and character. Sophia saw something in you, and after what she told me, I wanted to witness it for myself. I don't disperse money without reason. I invest in things I believe will flourish, and I believe you are worth betting on." John exhaled, running a hand over his head. He wasn't a man who easily flustered, but this was a lot to process. He looked at Sophia. And you concur with this? She nodded. Completely. I recognize a good business mind when I see one. You may not realize it yet, but you possess everything it takes to operate a successful shop. You just need the resources to make it happen. John glanced between the two of them, still grappling with the sheer absurdity of the situation. This morning he had awakened thinking today would be just like any other, and now a billionaire was sitting in his garage offering him the kind of opportunity most people only dreamed of. But he wasn't naive. He had spent too much of his life building from the ground up to believe in handouts. His pride wouldn't allow him to accept something for nothing. He crossed his arms. I appreciate the offer, but I don't accept charity. Richard studied him for a long moment before smiling. That's precisely why I'm making it. This isn't charity, John. It's a business decision. If you fail, I lose my investment, simple as that. But I don't believe you'll fail. I believe you'll build something remarkable, and one day you'll recall this conversation not as a favor, but as the genesis of something far greater. John remained silent, his mind racing. Richard leaned forward, his expression turning serious. Opportunities like this don't come often, son. But when they do, the only question is, are you ready to seize them? John sat there, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Richard Bennett's, as the weight of the moment settled over him like a heavy blanket. $100,000. Not a loan, not a gift, but an investment. The kind of opportunity that didn't just land in a mechanic's lap. Hell, the kind of opportunity that didn't land in anyone's lap. And yet, here it was, staring him in the face, encapsulated in the confident gaze of one of the city's most powerful businessmen. He could feel the tension in his own chest, that familiar instinct to be wary creeping in. He had spent his entire life striving for everything he had, scraping by, taking pride in the fact that nothing had ever been handed to him. This felt too immense, too sudden. A small part of him, the part that had witnessed people get burned by deals that seemed too good to be true, wanted to decline, wanted to walk away before he owed anyone anything. But then there was the other part. The part of him that had spent years envisioning something grander, years gazing at other people's names on garage doors, wondering if he'd ever see his own there. The part of him that knew deep down that if he rejected this, he might never get another chance like it. John exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his jaw. I need to ask you something, he said finally, his voice measured. Why me? Richard leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable but not unkind. Because I've dedicated my entire career to investing in people, John. Not companies, not trends, but people. And I've learned to recognize those who possess something genuine, something worth investing in. I see it in you. The way you carry yourself, the pride you take in your work, the way you declined money last night. Not because you didn't need it, but because you weren't doing it for the money. He paused, eyes sharp. That tells me everything I need to know. John let that sink in. He looked at Sophia, who gave him a small, knowing smile, as if she had already anticipated his answer before he even did. He looked around the garage, at the tools he had used every day for the past 5 years, the cracked concrete floors, the old workbench covered in oil stains and worn-down rags. This wasn't his. It had never been his. He had always been just another employee here. Then he thought about what his own shop would look like. His name on the door, his rules, his future. He took a deep breath. All right, he said, his voice steady. I'm in. A slow, satisfied smile spread across Richard's face. Good. I had a feeling you would be. Sophia grinned. Took you long enough. John shook his head, chuckling under his breath. Yeah, well, I had to make sure I wasn't selling my soul or something. Richard let out a low chuckle. No souls required, just hard work. And from what I've seen, that won't be a problem for you. They spent the next hour reviewing the details. Richard explained that the money would be wired to him within 2 days. No contracts, no fine print, just an investment based on a handshake and trust. He didn't want a share of the business, didn't want his name on anything. The only thing he requested was John's best effort. John promised he'd deliver. 2 months later, the grand opening of Carter's Auto Works was more significant than John had ever imagined. The new garage occupied a prime lot on the edge of the city with a sleek sign above the entrance. His name bold and prominent for the world to see. The interior was immaculate. Freshly painted walls, top-of-the-line tools, and brand new lifts that actually functioned without needing a swift kick to start. And the customers. They came not just because of the shop's modern appearance, but because of John himself. His reputation had preceded him. People who had been coming to him for years at Tony's now brought their business to Carter's Auto Works. Word spread rapidly. One customer turned into 5, 5 turned into 20. Within a month he had to hire 2 additional mechanics just to keep up with demand. It was his, finally. Sophia stopped by often, sometimes under the guise of needing a routine checkup on her car, but mostly just to see how things were progressing. Their conversations had become easier, more familiar, filled with inside jokes and business discussions. She had a keen eye for strategy, and John wasn't too proud to admit that some of her suggestions had helped him optimize the shop's operations. As for Richard, he visited every now and then, but never as an investor scrutinizing his money, simply as a friend observing something he had believed in come to fruition. One evening, as they stood outside the garage watching the last customer of the day drive off, Richard glanced at John with a satisfied nod. "I told you," he said simply. "You were worth betting on." John smiled, shaking his head. Yeah, all right, I'll admit it. You were right." Richard chuckled. "Get used to saying that. I usually am." John laughed, glancing up at his own name above the shop one more time, feeling the weight of everything it had taken to reach this point. He thought about that night on the side of the road, about how a simple act of kindness had led to this. It was a lesson he'd never forget, that sometimes the greatest opportunities stem from the smallest moments. And as he locked up the shop for the night, he knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.